What's up, internet friends? I'm Kevin Garaventa, and welcome to another episode of the PlayStation Plus Game Club. This is a show where we pick one game from the PlayStation Plus library and break it down for your entertainment, information, and amusement. Today we are talking about Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, which was developed by Starbreeze Studios under the direction of Josef Fares and published by 505 Games in 2013. You can see the inspiration for Fares' later games he is famous for, like A Way Out and It Takes Two, where two players cooperatively solve puzzles and complete tasks by working together. But Brothers is solely a single-player game where you control two characters at once. On the surface, Brothers seems like a simple yet innovative puzzle adventure game, but it goes much deeper than one would expect, and I can't wait to dive into it. Joining me for that is a very special returning club member, Sarah Amini. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. As soon as we started going through games to play, I thought this is one that I should send to you and see if you're interested in. So I'm very glad to have you here talking about it.
Super excited to talk about it.
Yeah. And also a good friend of mine who I've known for a very long time, I think about 12 or 13 years, Steve Watkins. Welcome to the Game Club.
Hey, Kevin. Thank you for inviting me to this, and thank you for having me. And Sarah, it's great to be here with you as well.
Likewise, Steve.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. I sent you a list of games to play, and I'm really glad you picked this one because it's been, I think, maybe about a decade since I first played this, and I still haven't stopped thinking about it, and I finally get to talk to somebody about this. So I'm really glad you picked it.
I am too. I didn't know what I was getting into, but it was incredible. So yeah. I can't wait to talk about it more.
Yeah. But before we start talking about it and get into a deep discussion, is there anything that you'd like to plug, Steve?
I don't have any really public projects going on or anything like that. I'm not super active on social media, so I'm just going to keep it real safe and say celebrate teachers. The school year is over, and if you have a teacher friend, go give them a hug and maybe a beer or some tea, whichever they prefer. Wish all of your parent friends good luck as they navigate that whole pool this summer. So go teachers.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Thank you. And Sarah, is there any sort of project or program that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, very much in line with Steve. Not very active on social media, but I would love to promote CASA. It's a program which stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates for Foster Youth. They are a nonprofit and run completely by volunteers. So if you are able to support them, I know your local CASA would very much appreciate that.
Yeah, that's great. That's a big deal. And then for myself, just if you want to be part of an episode of the PlayStation Plus Game Club, you can send us an email at psplusgameclub@gmail.com with game suggestions or thoughts you have about our monthly featured game. And speaking of that, again, the game we picked to play this month is Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. Before we even start talking about this game, I feel like this game is going to be like similar to something extremely special. Like this whole episode is going to be special. If you remember, like back in the 90s when family dramas would be kind of fun and stuff, and they would have advertisements when you were watching commercials, and like they would say, like, you know, find out what happens on Raising Three Kids tonight when Judy and Jim go away for the weekend. The kids are left with Aunt Rachel, and things get crazy. But then every once in a while, like, there'd be a commercial where they'd say, like, tomorrow night on a very special episode of Raising Three Kids, things get serious. And the voice gets really deep, and it's like, tune in, don't miss it. And I feel like this episode is going to be one of those where things are going to get kind of serious. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, unexpectedly serious.
Like, there's
Definitely deep announcer voice serious.
yeah. Can you give me like what were your first impressions from playing this game? Like in the first 5 minutes, like what did you think about? Like, is this kind of odd or weird to feel like you're controlling or what?
I always like to play with subtitles, and so immediately as soon as the game started, I was like, okay, I don't understand what they're saying. Maybe it's just me. Let me turn on the subtitles. Couldn't figure out for the life of me what was going on there. Had to Google it. So that was like, very much my first impression.
there are no subtitles, and that's a weird thing that you just have to get used to, because I was watching a commentary. So like, just a quick background for if you don't know, when you boot up the game, there is an option to turn on a commentary that I think you can unlock once you finish the game. But you can also find this on YouTube. And the director of the game, Josef Fares, has created this hour-long video where he plays through the major points of the game and talks about the development and the history of it. And one of the things that he brings up is that he based the language that they're talking on his own his own native Arabic language, but he wanted to make up his own language for this game to have the player just interpret for themselves what they're saying, and like just see the story actions for themselves, and not have someone directly saying what's going on. He wanted the player to interpret feelings in the game. So that was something that was a little bit strange and jarring for me. And when I replayed it this time, I felt like I was watching kind of like a weird low budget cartoon.
Yeah, when the words that they kept saying were Naiee and Naia, right?
Yeah.
And as I was starting to play through, because I had a similar kind of weird like disconnect, like Sarah described, where I'm like, okay, they're not speaking any language I understand, I guess. I think I'm just supposed to read into this. But as I was playing and trying to wrap my mind around the controls and like what my two hands should be doing as one, the brothers would call out Naia Naiee, and it wasn't until I was like halfway through that I realized that those were like calling. That was like a naming thing. And even then I was like, does that just mean brother? Like, are they just babbling? It was really strange for sure.
At least according to a few websites, they say that the older brother's name is Naia and the younger brother's name is Naiee. But you're right; those could just be words for brother. And like in Spanish, you have different versions of this word to denote like the kind of person you're speaking to, and
or your relationship to them. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So like you're kind of forced to just read into what's going on and pay attention to the actions rather than look for a script. He also said that like they went this direction just for budgetary reasons. It was a pretty low budget game at the time, and it was his first game. So like they said, well, let's just make up this language, and that way we don't have to pay actors to perform this. But for reference, like what the gameplay is that you control two brothers and try to solve puzzles by controlling them both at the same time. If you have a controller in your hand, your left hand moves the older brother and your right hand moves and does actions for the younger brother. And you have to play with them both at the same time. So I often ended up having one brother like run up into a wall and just keep going because I wasn't looking at him. And I would also get confused about which brother I was controlling. Did that happen to either one of you?
As somebody who struggles with left and right, this was very challenging for me.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely, yeah. I was doing what you were doing, Kevin, where like I would stop paying attention to one brother and like, have them be running into the wall or like going off into nowhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very challenging times.
It's hard to just get used to because like I'm not accustomed to controlling somebody or controlling a character with my right hand. Like I typically feel like that should be used for moving the camera around. And so at the beginning especially, I would like move that thinking that I was rotating the camera, and that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, and I think to that point too, it's interesting how much this game relies on player intuition. It's like there's no, I think they like spell out one instruction at the beginning, and beyond that, you're kind of left to your own devices to figure out what to do and how to play this game.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
Yeah, they often just like say that they want the player to kind of find their own way. So another thing that Fares talked about in the commentary was that they didn't include any sort of user HUD for you to like read anything on screen, and they just wanted the player to find things and stumble upon things. So like if you can make one of the brothers interact with something, you might miss it because you just didn't have him walk over there and there's no label to say that he can do something. It's just that if you get one of them close enough and hit the action button, then they'll do something, and they might do something unique compared to what the other brother might do. So I find that pretty fascinating when it comes to like how that game is structured.
Yeah, I was definitely searching out interactive elements almost in like at certain points at like will this work or won't it work? Just like everything that was available to me on screen, which sometimes it was really cool and effective, and other times it was like, this is a little frustrating, but that's just the way it was structured.
Yeah. And there's only really one action button for you to use, and that really simplifies the game. So you don't have to think about like whether I hit the button for the heavy attack or the light attack, or like you have like one button for jumping, another button for swinging your sword. It's all just simply like move around and then do something, and that's what it is. And oftentimes if you're like trying to pick something up and hold it, you have to hold that button down. So in a sense, I felt like the game also makes you feel like you're actually a little bit closer to these brothers, because like if they're trying to grip the side of a ledge, you have to keep that button held down, or in my case it was the right or the left triggers, and you'd have to like really grip it tightly while you think about who you're moving, and you have to be very conscious about like what you're going to push or let go of or whatever.
I definitely found that out the hard way.
Oh no.
I definitely fell.
Yeah.
Me too.
I also did reach out to a couple of other people in a couple of different Facebook groups and just asked like, hey, has anyone else played Brothers, and do you want to comment on this? And I got a couple of responses. One guy, Max Borgman, let me know that this is what he said. I loved the very unconventional control scheme because it's a learning curve, and your growing familiarity with it is deliberately weird in order to fully serve the story, heightening certain emotional moments in a very palpable way. It's something you rarely see in games, with the exception of a few other creators like Hideo Kojima and Yoko Taro, who embody the notion of letting every single aspect of the game, from software to hardware, serve the narrative. Their stories hit different because of that foresight and dedication. And I completely agree with that, where you get this very heavy sense of like weight to your own actions when you have these brothers perform things or do things that you do feel like you have some connection to, but also like the action that they're performing is going to be different every time. And I think that no matter what they're doing, you're always like pushing the same button, but it becomes so familiar that you're just going to push one thing to make them do something. It feels like you're much more connected to what they're doing, and it feels like it also has more weight to what they're doing.
I think the fact that you can't move one too far ahead or too far behind the other to allow the game to progress also contributes to that. The way that your hands have to work together to make these two figures continue moving, not necessarily like synchronously, but well, yeah, synchronously, but not exactly in the exact same fashion is what I mean.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really interesting handicap to place on the game, but also really effective. And I have to say that I there were times when I really felt like I had grasped it and was moving them both in the way that I wanted them to, and they were, making things happen without really consciously thinking about it. And then, it's like golf. The next level, I would lose it again. I would get
Yeah.
out of my state. I'm like, no.
Oh, wait a
I felt that
second.
exact same.
Yeah. And then like the just the controlling them, like because you have to control them at the same time, sometimes they are like holding two ends of something really big and carrying it. Like in at the very beginning when the game opens up, they have to move a cart, and one brother is at the front, the other's at the back, and you have to control them both in moving this one single thing, and you kind of have to wrap your head around that.
Talk about it more towards the end, so I won't say any spoilers, but
Yeah.
I know that like the way you get used to this controlling of like, the left hand side is the older brother, right hand side is the younger brother, and by the time you get to the end, you get really accustomed to it, I think. And there's quite a curveball towards the end that
Yeah.
I'm surprised at how emotional these controls made me, which I've never experienced in any other game.
And we're definitely going to jump into that later. But like, just for story's sake, the setup is that you have these two brothers, and mom has died like before the game has started, but we see that, and that the younger brother watched her drown. He's afraid of water, and then the that plays into part of the gameplay where like the younger brother is, because he's afraid of water, he won't swim, and he has to like crawl onto the older brother's back, who then swims across like a small river or something, and that's how you get past certain points. Also, what gets set up in that first chapter is that dad is also sick, and he's being taken to the local doctor, and the local doctor tells the two boys, like, you need to go find the tree of life or tree of light, whatever it is, and just like shows them a picture of it and then hands it to them to go ask for help from other people in directing them where it is. This again, like, this is all things that you just kind of have to interpret and watch what's playing out and not really understand the language. But they talk to each other for like a few minutes, and it's kind of awkward to just see them talking back and forth and you not understanding anything. It also made me feel like I was a foreigner in like another place and not really understanding the conversation that was very serious happening in front of me, but just knowing that something is very wrong that needs to be addressed pretty quick.
Yeah, and I think that the urgency that is delivered in that first scene, I really felt that as I was beginning to play the game. I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know how long this game was going to be. And I found myself, at least in the very beginning, just like pushing as fast as I could to get through these levels because of how effective that urgency was delivered in that opening scene where I did not understand a word.
Yeah. It's very well delivered in terms of like not using words, but still conveying a conversation that's happening.
I felt similarly, where I was like almost frustrated because I did feel this urgency, but I was still getting accustomed to how to move the camera position,
Yeah.
how to navigate using things. And yeah, I think for me it was a little frustrating at the beginning, but I definitely felt that urgency.
Yeah. Speaking just in general terms, like how would you recommend this kind of game to someone, or would you say like I like to ask people here on the show, like, how would you rate this on a scale of 1 to 3? Is it a don't bother, or it's not worth your time? Maybe get it at a discount if you have a subscription, try it out. Or like, I should have paid a lot of money for this. Like, is it that good?
I definitely think it is worth your time. I ended up paying, I think, $5. It was on sale the normal price of $20, which I think $20 might be a bit much given how short the game is, but
Yeah.
I think it's worth paying money for it. I think even like $10 would have been totally worth it. Could have paid a little more.
Yeah, I have to agree that it is definitely worth an experience to at least try out. And it feels like, maybe $20 is a little bit high, but it is one of those things that I really can't recommend enough for people to just check out if they have access to it. What about you, Steve?
I felt the same way, that I got it on a discount, and that seemed to be just right. I think I would recommend it more highly for certain people in my life as opposed to others. I know for a fact, like one of my brothers, coincidentally, would be very frustrated by the gameplay and probably wouldn't make it. But it's definitely, it's not $20, but it's worth paying for because the story is, the puzzles aren't the most challenging, but the story is so compelling, and it's really affirming too. I mean, it's just it's a good playthrough.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Very unique experience.
Mm-hmm.
Nah, Maridaki, Sabe, Mafi Sadi, Abaya, Vida Wade, Ada.
But before we get into a spoiler talk about Brothers, Sarah, you did mention that it did get you a little bit emotional, and inserting in a small section of other books or games or movies recommendations, I want to kind of jump off that. Have there been other games that have kind of made you feel a little bit emotional? And what would you recommend for someone looking for something like that?
Yeah, I think some of the more like classically emotional games like Red Dead Redemption 2 really, really got me. Ghost of Tsushima actually got me as well. And these are definitely like long form games and way different from Brothers. I think Brothers is unique in that like in such a small amount of time without like a complex narrative. I think, the story is straightforward enough to intuit it without any dialogue. It was still able to like bring me to the emotional state that like a very like robust game like Red Dead Redemption brought me to. But yeah, I'm usually a big fan of those emotional long games.
Yeah. Yeah. Steve, what about you? Is there anything you'd recommend?
So I didn't have any before, really. I haven't really been hit in the feels by games too much, where I'm like, oh, that curve right there, that like, kind of takes the air out of your lungs. And you're just like, oh, I need to sit in this.
Yeah.
But Sarah brought up Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm like, and that just triggered my brain a little bit. It's like, oh, wow, wait, that was incredible. So if you haven't played Red Dead Redemption 2, it's worth it. I think more like, and maybe it's weird to compare this to a book, but because it's so narrative heavy, because the reveal has the weight of like this great twist, it makes me think almost of great twists in books that are not necessarily like the revealing of a whodunit. We got the murderer, Hercule Poirot kind of a thing, but more like. So I'm not going to reveal anything about this series, but I've been reading the Expanse book series, and it was book 5. There's something that happens in book 5 of the Expanse series that stopped me in my tracks in a way that I never would have expected. Very similar to the reveal that happened in this game. So if you're into, some sci-fi interesting stuff, I mean, the Expanse book series, the TV series is incredible too, but pick up the book series too. It's a lot of fun, and when it gets real, it gets real.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to check that one out. I remember you recommended me the book series before, and I haven't gotten to it, but I should. Other games that I thought of, like I've been hit a number of times emotionally when playing video games, but like ones that come to mind are Shadow of the Colossus. That one really hit me, and if you've played it or you know anything about it, you might know what those particular moments are. The same goes for Telltale's The Walking Dead, especially season 1. The very end of that, it wrecked me the first time I played through that. And yeah, Telltale knows how to do that. Another great series that they made was The Wolf Among Us. And the end of the first episode of The Wolf Among Us didn't get me emotional, but I do think it is one of the only games where a cutscene has given me chills straight up, and not in a horror sense, just pure shock. So I highly recommend just checking that out. It was on the level of like the end of an episode of really good HBO TV. Like it was one of those where it's just like, I can't believe this just happened kind of thing. Last of Us Part 1, like definitely like the first 15 minutes of those, like of that will get me emotional. The end of BioShock Infinite absolutely like made it so I couldn't sleep that night because of everything that happened in it. But the one that I could not stop thinking about that I thought of, like, you know, what games have made me really feel emotional. And I couldn't believe that I'm saying this, but Titanfall 2 really got me. I don't know what it is about robots that become your friends, but something about certain moments in that game got me teary-eyed. And it was just that, like, it think of like Call of Duty meets the Iron Giant, and that's the premise of the game.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. You know, this giant robot tank becomes your best friend, and they have a great buddy cop comedy going along the way, and then things get serious, and it gets really, really emotional. Also, you know, Josef Fares has been famous for a couple of other games that he's made after Brothers, and one of them is called A Way Out, which is it's like a prison break premise where two players have to control a prisoner, and like these two prisoners have to try and break out of a prison by cooperating together. And then the same kind of concept of cooperation came in his next game called It Takes Two. And Sarah, you recommended that I check out It Takes Two with my wife, and we started playing it last week, and it's been a lot of fun. But for someone who doesn't play games, that's a hard one to jump into. It is a steep learning curve.
That's fair. I remember playing it with my partner, who is way more into video games than I am, and it would lead to near fights at times where it would, like, miss platforms and ruin it for him too, like over and over and over again. But we got through it. Yeah, that was also another emotional game, I think, especially towards the end. It's very good.
Okay, yeah, looking forward to finishing that. I think we've gotten through like the first 2 chapters, so we'll keep going. But I've been told that like I should stop continuously saying like, oh, it's fine. No, you can do it. It's fine. And like I'm trying to be your cheerleader all the way through. But we'll make it, I'm sure. Is there anything else that you're reading, watching, playing that you'd like to recommend?
No, I don't think so. Yeah. Another shout out for It Takes Two. It's nice that like it's a co-op game, which is so rare these days. I grew up with those, playing with them with my sister on a PS2, and now we have the online stuff, which I don't really use. And yeah, it was a nice breath of fresh air. Yeah, breath of fresh air. Excuse me.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's more fun to just play with the person next to you rather than, you know, have to coordinate online.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about you, Steve? Is there anything else that you want to recommend, and any form of media?
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I was thinking when Sarah talked about growing up playing cooperative games, I immediately thought of Battletoads and how I used to play that with my older brother. So yeah, there is something lost when you're trying to always do an online thing. I'm really interested in some of these Fares titles, actually. Yeah. So I've been reading. You know, I just started a new job, and part of that I've been trying to grow my knowledge base. So I've been reading a lot of Indigenous authors. So if you're looking for a new book, looking for an author, Stephen Graham Jones does some great Native American themed like horror books, And then Tommy Orange is a great author as well. Marcy Rendon does some great like Midwestern. I believe her main character is Ojibwe, like whodunits, basically, with a really iconic character. So I don't know. Those are what I'm reading right now, and I think it's really great to expand the library a little bit and include some more voices. So if you're not into those books, at least finding some books by some authors of people who are way different from you to try and grow your library, grow your knowledge.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Well, the only other recommendation I have is for next month, we will be talking about the very weird and strange game Blasphemous. Blasphemous feels like if you were to take a Castlevania game and give it a heavy medieval religious makeover and add in a lot of obscure lore and horror elements like Dark Souls, it would kind of turn into Blasphemous. And I'm really looking forward to dissecting that next month. And again, if you want to be a part of that show, just write in to psplusgameclub@gmail.com. And I look forward to reading any other comments that we get next month. But for now, let's get into a full spoiler talk for Brothers.
Mafi, Isada.
Iada.
Na Mafi, Badi na.
Tabi ana. Bisayen. Naiee. Mata. Huh?
Falila.
Ah.
Starting off, in chapter 1, the brothers make their way through this town. Were there any particular puzzles or set pieces that you wanted to highlight?
So I just felt we start with the littlest brother mourning the mother out on a cliff overlooking like an endless expanse of sea.
Yeah.
And then we're taken in with this cart with the older brother to an outpost that looks like it's an outpost that's just inland from a cliff that stares out over an endless expanse of sea. And when finally you crank some stuff, you climb a cliff at one point, and then you're inside the village. For whatever reason, that just kind of hit me as like, oh, here's the world now, And I had no idea this, because the scope was so limited to just stuck with the two brothers as you're working them through this village and on your way. You don't really have a sense of when that will end either. And so it was kind of a profound difference from, being able to see the horizon and seeing nothing there, and then just being surrounded by material and like interactive elements, and only having a very limited scope. I just really felt good about that. That was really amped for the adventure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of strange to have like, the mother die at sea and then have her grave be right there on the cliff. And like it's almost like the younger brother can't really escape the idea that, she died right in front of him, and he kind of blames himself for it, but we don't really know. You kind of just get this idea that they are in a remote place that doesn't have much, and that's another reason why, like, they have to go on this huge journey to help Dad, because he can't really get the care from the doctor that they have.
Yeah, and I'll say that first part too, it's interesting in terms of like the characters and the emotions of it, where it starts really heavy and the dad's really sick and you're feeling this urgency, and you get into town and there's this weird little guard that kind of feels like childlike almost, or it's like a cartoon character bad guy like snickering, trying to like get in your way. It was such a dramatic shift almost. It's like, okay, I guess this is like a lighthearted game, I think.
He was like the local bully that would just stop them from doing anything, and really was just there to annoy them. So when you eventually get to release a small dog out of its cage and have him chase the bully, it felt pretty satisfying, but still very, very cartoony in a certain way. And fun fact about that is that the dog was modeled using Josef Fares' own dog. in the commentary, he says that they just like brought in his dog one day and they scanned the dog and then like mapped the dog onto the character model they had and used that as like a small nod to his own family. And then as for like the motion acting that they have, Josef Fares did all of that himself because they didn't have the budget to pay actors. So they just had like a bunch of suits that he got into and did the mocap for. And then they had a couple of actors, with a script that, had a language that he made up, but he also gave them a full script so they would have the full emotions behind all the words that they were saying. Kind of an I Am Groot case going on here where, they know what they're saying, but we don't.
Right. Does his motion acting include the interactions of the two brothers, that like the diverse interactions that they have?
I think so. And those, he also said that like he doesn't want to have actions repeated so much that they get bland. He said that in the commentary they tried not to repeat too many things. He wanted the game to have a lot of unique one-time elements, like the dog in the field a little bit later. He said if they had more time, they would have made it so nothing was repeated. But there are a couple of repeated things, like the broken ladder and the rope that you have to make. Like you kind of have to have the older brother boost up the younger brother to reach the broken ladder and then drop a rope down so they can both climb up the ledge. But aside from that, like, yeah, there were completely different actions for them to do. Like a good example of that in the first section is you can find a well and the older brother will just peer into it, but the younger brother will spit into it. Like the kind of stuff that young kids do. And like those kinds of different actions are all throughout the game. I
found myself taking the little brother up to interact with things before the big brother.
Actually.
But then at one point you have to have the younger brother interact with something. Like there's a guard that's asleep in front of a bridge that is up, and they need to lower this bridge to get across the gap. And the older brother just tries to wake him up and the guy just shrugs him off. But the younger brother dumps a bucket of water on the guard and that wakes him up right away. And then he lowers the bridge. That kind of like younger, more playful stuff that the younger brother can do adds a little bit of levity to the game in the beginning. And I think it's really nice to kind of bring it out of the seriousness that is set up that you mentioned, Sarah. Eventually you get to like the outskirts of the village. You can run up to the kid that's like throwing what looks like a basketball at a hoop and have the younger brother throw it and like make the basket, which is cool.
Were those achievements for you guys? Because I maybe this is taboo or whatever, but I was playing this on my Switch. So whenever I did something random like that, it gave me an achievement of switch it, swish or something like that.
Yeah, and those are peppered throughout the whole game. And Josef Fares again said that he wanted the achievements, the trophies, whatever, to be like these miniature little stories that you could find along the way. And they would almost have nothing to do with the other, like the rest of the game, but they would just be these other stories that they could tell. Like one of those, like in the village outskirts, is there is this. I don't know if you found this, but there is a small fire pit in the middle of a clearing, and there's a pack of bunnies that are hopping around in the area. They're all black except one of them, and one of them is white. And what you can do, and like I didn't know that you could do this until I saw the video, but Josef Fares does it. And what you can do is have the younger brother walk up to the white bunny and pick it up and then kind of roll it around in the fire pit and cover it in a dark ash. And then it can go join the darker bunnies, and because like it keeps chasing them around and they keep running from it. And then it becomes like, one of the family, and the younger brother helped to do that.
I thought it was really delightful that I wasn't sure how many of those achievements there were, but every time that there was something interesting, I just kind of walked over to it, interacted with it. That was one that I did do, and I because I was using the younger brother for his funny, remarks or whatever first, that like it just immediately, took the rabbit, coated it in soot, and then left it, and it was like achievement. And I was like, oh, sweet.
I totally missed that one. Now I'm sad.
Oh.
I definitely remember petting a cat. That was cute.
Oh, yeah.
Right outside the village.
There's another interesting puzzle where like you kind of have to like dodge this dog as you're jumping across hay bales through a field. And I didn't realize you could do this, but you could whistle to the dog and get him to run over to one of the brothers while the other one jumps down and runs to the next set of hay bales. And I was just, waiting for the dog to go around to one side of the hay bales, so then I would barely make it when the brother got to the next set of hay bales. So that felt like kind of a hairy puzzle that I thought was a lot harder than it actually was, because I didn't try all the actions. But how was that for you guys? Did you end up like not having trouble with that one?
Yeah, I because and it could have been accidental too. As I mentioned, I really struggled with the controls a lot of the time. But when one of the brothers got up on a hay bale, and then I just perhaps accidentally, maybe intentionally, pressed the action button, and then the resulting whistle and the dog ran over there. That one I was able to get through pretty quickly. I definitely ran into a few others at the beginning that were as soon as I got them figured out, I was like, this is oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This is my brain, huh? This is how my brain works, I guess.
Oh, I was just going to say I got very trigger happy with those action buttons after a while. So I figured, look, this is the only way to play this game. It's just continuously press this button and see what happens. But for that specific part, it took me a hot minute to realize that they could do that.
Yeah. So then, like, near the end of this area, you keep climbing the mountain. And did you end up seeing, like, benches along the way that you could just sit back and relax at?
Sat at every single bench, I think.
Yeah, yeah. They're peppered throughout the entire game, and you can just sit at them and look at the view. And, they really are, like, each unique and very picturesque. So I did take a couple of screenshots of those. Just to look at later, but they look really nice. And then after you pass a couple of those benches, you run into a troll that at first I thought like I was gonna have to fight somehow, but he was friendly. And
he was sad.
Yeah, but he was also kind of friendly, and he reminded me kind of like Shrek, if Shrek was better understood by the village.
Yeah, no pitchforks there. It was just a sad, friendly troll giant.
Yeah.
Hanging out in the mountain.
And then he helps you continue your journey by like picking you up and then like placing you on cliffs or throwing you across gaps. That was cool. Or like he'll like reach between two different cliffs and let you walk across his arms, which was kind of funny.
I just want to say that I loved that part. Because it gave a really good look at just how rugged the terrain had become. And again, like I mentioned, I sat at every single bench because I'm a freak, and I was like craving that horizon look. I wanted to see more. And the way that the troll giant interacted with the mountain and how it helped you interact with the mountain was just so cool. I loved it. The art was beautiful.
Yeah, it was a great change of expectations as far as a game goes, where like if you run into a troll that looks like this, you just assume that you're gonna have to fight him. That's not the case here. Like he's friendly and he's here to help you, even though he's a lot bigger than your characters.
Kind of a nice change of pace as well.
Yeah,
you're interacting with this giant to get around rather than just climbing.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
Aru, when hadi da? Sa?
Da, yeah.
And then like you eventually get to the like a cave that I guess like he jumps down into a pool of water, and that leads you to a cave that is actually a mine where other trolls are there mining out gold or whatever ore is in there. And there are a ton of mechanical puzzles, and this stage was where my brain started to kind of bend when solving these puzzles. Like there's a point where you have to grab onto like chains that are attached to a conveyor belt, and then have one brother hold on to those chains while the other one has to turn cranks that open doors for the chains to pass through.
Oh yeah.
You know, these were some of those crazier puzzles. Like, what did you think of these really weird puzzles?
You go first, Sarah, because I have a lot to say.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say this was the most challenging part of the game, at least like solving the puzzles in this part, because it was, again, like there's no instruction on what to do. And I didn't keep getting lost, but I got turned around a couple of times as well, which did not help.
Yeah.
And fell many times. I'm not the best gamer. But yeah, I think out of all of the parts of the game, this is the most challenging gameplay.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Steve?
Well, so first of all, the troll like city under the earth gave me some real Skyrim vibes of the deep dwarven cities that I was like,
yeah,
oh, this is great, taking me back to like going way too deep. You know?
I hated those.
Yeah, it was like it was the kind of one where I played an archer and just walked through on a crouch the whole time, hoping nothing ever saw me.
Same.
So
I did the same thing. Yeah.
So I love this area, and just to provide some context, in the last section, I spent almost an hour on the stupid sheep puzzle because I couldn't grasp the fact that a sheep would go on a hamster wheel.
It took me a while too.
I really struggled with that, and then when it came into this giant city, that like whatever part of my brain was active for problem solving really engaged. I flew through this section, but I also just really liked it because one of the interactions, Kevin, that you had talked about from the beginning was using the two brothers together with an item with two different ends to it. And there's a point here where you have to pick up like a pillar or a lever or something. You have to navigate it through this warren of like blocks and things, and the brothers are kind of carrying it over stuff. And like that was like an Etch-a-Sketch that you're just trying to retrace, you know? And I really, really liked that. And it wasn't until I got past a lot of those mechanical puzzles to where you're like literally dangling from walls again that I started falling and stuff. I was just like flowing through this one, and I just really digged it.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Like when I was going through that one puzzle where you have to carry the giant pipe, and you have a brother at each end of it, and they're navigating those blocks, I just thought to myself, like, how many times have I moved a giant dresser and like, you know, helped somebody else move it, and it's kind of like, well, okay, you need to back into the doorway here and then turn, and then like we'll go this way, and that's what it felt like, and I loved it. Then like you get to the end of this mine, and there's another troll trapped in a cage, and you know, it's another friendly troll. She points at the lock and then points to the lever. That, by the way, the older brother can pull those levers. The younger brother can't because he's not strong enough. If you've tried to make the younger brother pull them, it's kind of funny where he just kind of hangs off the lever and it doesn't move. But like you have to get the younger brother to squeeze through the bars to where a third troll is that's guarding this area. He's like guarding a gate. You have to steal the key off of him, go unlock the cage, and then have the older brother pull the lever, and the troll escapes. But then, like, you know, she doesn't take you with her. Instead, like, you now have to deal with the guard troll who is chasing after you, and you end up like using the younger brother to bait him into the cage and then shut the door behind him. And the younger brother can just squeeze through the bars and it's fine. I thought that was one of the more comedic, funny moments of the game. And a puzzle that had me thinking a little bit more outside the box.
I think so too. I didn't realize at first to have the younger brother squeeze through the bars. I was trying to get him to walk right out the door again.
Yeah.
So that was fun, but also very rude of the other troll to just leave them hanging.
Yeah. And then you come across to another area where you have to fight this other troll, and you have the younger brother baiting him around the room to then smash parts of the wall that pull away anchors that's stopping a gate in the floor from opening, and then you get him to stand on this gate while the older brother pulls a lever and the gate opens up and he falls through. But he doesn't fall completely. He hangs on like he's a bodybuilder, and he just braces himself at the top of this hole that has just opened up beneath him. And you have to get both brothers to go down and pull his hands up off the edge. And I felt really bad for this troll at this point, because I was like, oh man, this is kind of brutal to both brothers have to go down and work together to hopefully not kill this troll, just make him fall down this pit, and maybe he'll end up where the other guys are mining the ore, and he'll just have to run back up here at some point. But it was still a fun puzzle, but it was kind of I don't know how this makes me feel right now.
Yeah, that was the first. So when you encounter the first troll up on the mountain, and like you said, Kevin, you're like, ooh, do I have to fight? When that thought crosses your mind, you're also like, how am I going to do this with this controller layout? How am I going to do this by controlling these two characters? And I thought was the first quote unquote boss fight, because there were multiple interactions you had to make in order to get through the stages to eventually move past it.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was such a fun, interesting way to consider a boss fight, a totally different kind of engagement for how you would, tackle a level and move past the quote unquote boss of that space.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a great way to do it, to kind of create this sense of combat without actually fighting. You just had to bait him around the room, and that's it.
It almost felt childlike again.
Yeah.
Where I could see it happening in a kid's cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting given what happens next.
Hey!
So then you leave the mine with the troll that you freed from the cage. She's with you, and you run into the first troll from the other side of the mountain, and there are a couple. I didn't realize this at first, but then I thought back, oh yeah, there were 2 beds at that troll's house, and he was alone. So you've just rescued the troll's wife and brought her back to her husband. So that was pretty cute. I enjoyed that. And then they just kind of send you on your way, and that's it for their story. But that's another small story that you get to see along the way of the whole game. We have this cutscene that changes to night at back where the doctor's house is, and the dad is still sick there. And we have one of those really cool transitions where the camera peers out from the house, points up to the stars, and then turns and pans down to where the boys are. That was one of those movie moment kind of transitions that I thought to myself, oh, they got kind of artsy with this. This is really cool.
This is the point of the game where I was really hooked.
Yeah.
Same for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Because this is the chapter where they start out in the woods at night, and there are wolves that are starting to approach them, and as the older brother has to pick up one of the logs from the fire and use it as a torch to like fend them off, but the younger brother can't do that. I tried to have him pick up a torch too, and he's like, "Ah, I burned my hand." But like you have to like use the older brother to wave the torch at these wolves, and if he gets too far ahead of the younger brother, the wolves come up from behind and attack. So you really have to keep in mind of like where they both are at the same time. That was a really interesting puzzle.
I liked how speaking of artsy, just I think about the way that the gameplay played out with like the encroaching darkness, right? That was representative of the wolves, and then the wolves' eyes were just kind of glowing in it.
Yeah.
I just thought that was a really awesome effect, and it totally different from what you just jumped out of.
Yeah. What that last chapter was, it was all like fun and whimsical. This one was getting kind of dark.
Yeah.
This almost reminded me of like a horror gameplay, like Alan Wake. I remember, yeah. And also, did you guys notice the hanged bodies above them?
Yeah.
Casually.
Oh, yeah. It's like
I was very shocked.
It's like this is the start of that on the very special episode, right?
Things get a little serious now. And then there's like this moment where they both like fall into a river that's moving really fast. They go over a waterfall, and one of them ends up on a high cliff. The younger brother ends up on a low cliff, and you have to like move the branch that the older brother can hold on to. The younger brother has to climb it, but like up in the way, there are like these tree monsters that I didn't notice the first time, and you just straight up grabbed the younger brother and killed him. They look like tree stumps, and then they have hands for like branches for hands, and they move just a little bit, and they're really creepy. That's another reference there. Sarah, you were talking about like a horror game. Like those are straight out of a horror game. I thought they were really cool looking.
Yeah.
It would have been neat to see them more, but again, like Fares said, like we don't really want to repeat stuff here, so you see them once, and it's really neat.
Was this the section with the cemetery as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. That this whole the start of this aesthetic was like very spooky.
Yeah.
It was fun.
You have like some guy with a lantern at the church that directs you to go through the cemetery. It's pretty cool looking. And then after they like fall into the water again, there's a dream sequence, and
This was so
it was weird, but like the younger brother goes into the water and starts to sink. The older brother like jumps in and pulls him out of the water. They both like go up this hill, and there is a giant that is laying down next to the river, and it's their mom. The younger brother talks to her. According to Josef Fares, they were saying, "Don't be afraid. You need to grow." That kind of thing. And then the older brother like grabs him and starts hitting him, and just being a real asshole. But I couldn't really understand why this was happening.
This was it was really weird, right? So it grabbed your attention because it's so strange, and like you can tell that it's a dreamy sort of sequence. And at the same time, it's just close enough to what the reality was that you're like, is it a dream, really though? Which I guess is like you're approximating a dream pretty well then. And I don't know why the older brother was hitting him either. I think maybe it was because he was like in the real world trying to revive him.
Maybe, yeah.
was my guess.
But the way the whole thing played out was very eerie. And I struggled with getting the little brother to the right plate, like the right physical position to engage the action to talk to the mother for whatever reason. But outside of that, like difficulty that I had, it was just a really interesting, it was almost like an aside.
Yeah, I just saw like, when the older brother gets on top of the younger one, like he starts hitting him. I just thought like, well, this is what older brothers do sometimes. They can be real assholes, and I'm an older brother. I've been a real asshole. At times I regret it. And then at the end of the dream though, like he starts to choke the younger brother, and so I guess maybe it would just started to turn into a nightmare. Like it then cuts to the real world, and the older brother is trying to wake up the younger brother by shaking him, and that's what translates into the dream. Like it's just kind of weird like that, I guess.
Oma. Mai. Oma.
They both wake up, and it's daylight again. They're in this new area that the chapter names are not named here. So I just named them like here are the high rocks. Like that's where they are. They're in the mountains. Right at the beginning, you start to go along the path, and you see up in the corner of the screen, out in the distance, there is a guy who is just about to hang himself on a tree.
That was casual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you end up saving him?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought that was part of the plot, but it was.
Oh yeah. And like
side thing.
Yeah, you can. So it's weird. Like he's not even on the direct path for you to go. So like you can see him from the path and you can see him do it, but you can just pass right by and let him go about doing his thing. You can bring both brothers down there and have the older one lift him up so that he's not hanging from the tree, and have the younger brother climb up the tree and untie the rope. But you have to do it while the older brother is still holding it up. Otherwise, the younger one can't, get a grip on the knot or whatever. And I didn't realize this the first time I saw it, but next to the tree that he was hanging, there is a house that has been burned. And there are two bodies, one of an adult and then what looks like a child. They're both covered in like a sheet. And this guy, after you take him down from the tree, he starts just weeping beneath it. And this is another one of those like small stories that Fares is telling using, the trophies, where like you can get a trophy for doing this. But I didn't realize you could do this until I saw his video with the commentary. But you can find your way along the side of the cliff into the house and find like a music box and bring that back to the guy who's weeping. And this kind of brings him out of his, this terrible state that he's in, and gets him to, I guess, move on with life, as hard as that is. But you end up helping him bury his wife and child right there. And then he leaves instead of just hanging himself. So that's like the small story. I didn't, when I first found him, I just saved him. I didn't know what to do after he was crying. But did you end up doing anything beyond just getting him off the tree?
Yeah. This little story is one of the reasons why this section of the game was by far my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we divvy it up all the same, but the things that I lump into this section, this is included. It's just, I loved it. And I initially I didn't, figure it out. He was weeping, and I knew that there was a burned house, and I saw that there was a cliff extending out from the house, and I thought, well, maybe that's something I could get to, but I just don't know how. And I started moving on. But every time that I went up the hill, which was to the left of where this whole thing happened, he doesn't leave the view. He's just down there weeping, and so I couldn't leave it alone.
Yeah.
So I wound up going back and trying to figure it out, and I eventually did get the two brothers over there and find the music box. And I was really happy that I did, because the way that it ended with them helping to bury the two bodies and seeing this person has a little bit of closure, it's just a little small, beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I can say I have a cold, dead heart. First the bunnies, now this guy. Oh no.
Don't feel too bad. Like I couldn't figure it out the first time, and I left him there too. If you can, find a way to get into the house, you can bring a memento back to him that brings him out of that. other parts of this chapter, which I thought were really cool, was you get to meet the, first there is a mountain goat ride that you both the brothers climb mountain goats, and then, you get to ride these mountain goats across big gaps, which is really cool, climb some really steep cliffs. Then there's an inventor who is living up in this remote house that he's gotten a bunch of contraptions together, which is pretty cool. There is this giant musical horn up in the corner of his house that doesn't do anything, but you can blow into it and you can change the pitch of the horn. So it's a giant musical instrument. And I don't know if there's any reward to playing around with it, but it's just kind of a cool concept that's right there. Then he's got drawings on his table that were actually sketch concepts for the game that Josef Fares just threw in there because they needed some art for the game. There's a telescope that you can look through, and if you freed the parrot back in the village, which felt like hours ago, if you freed the parrot back there, you can find the parrot meeting up with a mate somewhere out in the forest using the telescope. And that's another one of the cute stories that he highlights in his commentary video. Did you end up finding that one? That one's really hard to find. So if you didn't, I don't blame you. I didn't see it the first time.
No, I didn't.
No.
It's cute though.
Yeah.
It sounds nice.
It's very adorable, back to the cartoony style that I feel like the inventor has as well. And then you get to take this glider from him that he just directs you to, and you get to fly the glider using the two brothers as weights to steer.
So I definitely loved it, but so I have one complaint about game mechanics that is tied up with this glider, and I had a lot of trouble with it, even though I understood the mechanics of how to navigate the glider. But so I didn't mind playing it 10, 20 times over and over and over again because it was so pretty. But it also, for whatever reason, the way that the camera pans and the way that you're moving the brothers from left to right, sort of as counterweights on this glider to move the glider from left to right, so you don't crash into the cliff faces or cave walls or anything like that. And I thought I had it figured out, and over and over and over again, the older brother would just drop off at one point when the camera panned again over to the left, and he was just a little bit too far over. And I even tried different things to correct it. I just really struggled with navigating this flyer over into the next section, even though it was very nice to do it repeatedly.
But eventually, yeah. I think I crashed it one or two times, but that was it. I was very cautious when I was trying to fly it though, because I would be okay, move just a little bit. Okay, move back a little bit. And I was trying to be very precise with the movements that I had the brothers doing, because it felt like their weight had a big impact on the direction of the glider. But eventually they crash it at the base of a tower that they can't really climb conventionally, and they end up tying a rope around each of their waist, and now they are connected to each other. It gets kind of cartoony, but at the same time I was looking at this thinking I don't think they could each support each other's weight like this. They're really they're really heavy. So
especially the little brother trying to carry on the older brother. I was that's not a thing. That won't work.
Yeah,
it
can't
does
elaborate,
It does have a really cool mechanic though, where you have to have one of them climb up one spot and then have the other one let go so he swings around the other direction. That was really neat, and I thought that was a fun mechanic to puzzle around.
Yeah, it was really fun getting them to swing and suspending disbelief, right? It was cool once you figured it out to have them swinging all over the place and, ascending in that way. This tower was huge.
Yeah. And I
It
didn't
was
realize.
cool.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say it was cool that they found another way to kind of diversify more climbing, but
Yeah.
it didn't feel the same. It was
Yeah.
fun.
But like I didn't realize that the tower itself was like inhabited by a giant until I got up to the top of the top room. And at that point it like you get up there and see that like, oh, right, this tower is a giant's tower. I should have realized that by the size of the windows and the stairs that you go past. But you get up into this room and it has a giant bed and a desk, and on the desk there is a caged kind of griffin thing that looks a little bit like an owl as well. So it's like crying inside this cage, and you end up using the brothers to free it and then fly it out of the tower. This is another one of those things where it's like, oh, this is a cool like fantasy character that you get to run into.
I thought they were going to help the bird first. So I was pretty upset that they just immediately flew on it and let it die.
There was blood on the table.
Yeah.
It was hurt.
Very injured.
But
Okay.
it just kind of, it seemed like it was ready to go. Like you can use the younger brother to interact with it and it's friendly, but then immediately it just turns around and motions for you to get up on its back. So it seemed like it was like, let's go, let's get out now before whoever it is comes back.
Yeah, I wondered how long it had even been there, because it looked like that whole tower was decrepit. It looked like the bed was slept in and everything, but everything else about it was like falling apart.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe like the giant that was there is often like has gone to war and it just never came back.
Da?
You fly it and like you don't really have to control it. It just flies itself in a cutscene, and then as soon as it lands, it just dies. And that was one of those moments where I was like, what? Why? Come on.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Seems
But-
so unnecessary.
And then like a feather floats off of it, and the older brother picks it up and looks at it, and it triggers a memory for him where he's learning to fish, and dad's teaching him how to fish. And I realized at this point, like, oh, each of these brothers had different relationships with their parents. And the older one was closer with dad, younger one's closer with mom. And like they don't really have the same connections to their parents. And in that, like, that changes the way I viewed the story so far, where like that makes more sense of like why the younger brother is not as serious about the situation as the older one.
Right. It's not just an age thing. It's also a relational thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I didn't explicitly make that connection, Kevin, until I didn't explicitly make that connection, but it was another thing that, like, as you said that, it sort of it awoke something in my brain that was like, oh wow, yeah, wait, if we look at this a new way now,
Yeah.
it makes it all that much, the ending that much more powerful, which we'll get to. But
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So this is like this next part is where it gets like even creepier, but it's still like during the daytime.
I thought this section was so cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. Like there are dead giants everywhere, and it looks like they were fighting. It looks like they were fighting each other because there are giant arrows sticking out of some of them. There are some very gruesome puzzles to solve. Like you have to like move an arrow that's sticking out of a giant's arm to get past it. You have to shoot a giant with a giant crossbow, and it like nails him between the eyes and makes him fall off a cliff and clears the way for you to keep going. Or like you have to.
blood.
Oh yeah. Well, like there's like this stream that you're walking through, and then it slowly starts to turn red. Like you're just kind of like wondering like what's going on here? Why is there blood in the water? And then you see one of the giant's arms, and you're like, oh god, oh my god. And then like the worst one was when you have to cut a giant's leg off with a massive axe to get it out of the way so you can keep going. But like this is like where it gets kind of gruesome, and my wife Carrie was on the sofa next to me watching this, and she was like, "This is really wow! Like this is really gross. Oh my god!" Like, yeah, this is it's getting ugly.
Take a moment to go from. Remember when at the beginning we were talking about how it's so cartoonish and lighthearted? I mean, yes, the dad was sick, but it felt like a little kids show.
Yeah.
And it just slowly progressed to this nightmare.
Yeah.
It was very unexpected, but very cool.
Yeah,
and this is so violent, right? The perfectly positioned crossbow for you to nail the giant head, the perfectly positioned axe for you to push it over and let gravity do its work. It was like, oh my god,
that's horrible. And then like the river becomes just more and more saturated with blood as you go down it, and there at the bottom of like this waterfall, there is a blood cult of people the size of the brothers. They're not giants, but just regular people that are worshiping the waterfall of blood that is coming off the mountain. And they have a woman tied up, like a young woman who's looks like she's about the age of the older brother, and you have to first of all you have to like run from them because they're like going to attack you if they see the brothers. And you have to run from them, and you hide behind like this pillar that you can see an image of what this like blood god that they're worshiping looks like. So then you get the brothers to walk underneath a blood waterfall and get covered in blood, and then stand on like one stands on the other's shoulders to become the shape of the blood god and trick these worshipers into thinking they're seeing whatever the thing that they're worshiping, and free the young woman. Again, like this is one of those like horrible yet brilliant things that you have the brothers do. And I loved this kind of puzzle.
I wasn't sure how long they were going to let you shamble around as the blood god with their prey. Essentially, I was like, when is this all going to fall apart? And it turns out pretty quickly. But
yeah.
I also wasn't sure if this was like another side thing too, where kind of like the hanged or almost hanged person. Like, seems insane. I thought you just free her and be on her merry way, but she sticks around.
She does, yeah. Like I thought like we were going to like take her back to her village, or like she was just going to go her own way, but she takes you to a rowboat that you then like get to the frozen iceberg area, and there are some orca whales that have a few extra fins, so they look a little bit fantastical, but they are like pretty to look at and majestic, but they are deadly too because they crushed the rowboat one time for me.
Yeah, I was careless once, and I timed things poorly, and the orca killed me.
Yeah.
I really like this area though because I like the mechanic of steering the boat, and it was really serene in a way after the bloodbath, literally.
Yeah.
I agree.
Oh, literal bloodbath. That's a good one. I didn't think about how literally it is. Yeah. There are like giant sea turtles that you can like bring, that they're like baby sea turtles, but they're huge, and you can bring them to their mother who is missing them. That was kind of a sweet moment. I really liked that. There is an overlook bench that you can sit at and like take in the view. And if you wait long enough, you can watch the orca whales down in the sea jump out and like jump around the icebergs. That's really nice.
Cool.
Then you end up like finding a handful of lumberjacks that are frozen solid in snow. Like it's not like they're frozen in ice. It's just like they've been turned into snow, and that's kind of ominous.
That was
Yeah, a little creepy. But it has also one of the cooler puzzles that I thought of in the game, where like you have to pull out the like a saw, like a 2-man saw, and have the brothers saw a tree down to create a bridge. And just the action of that to coordinate the back and forth was pretty cool. And I really liked that.
Yeah, this
fun.
section,
It's satisfying.
I was scared to walk across the log.
Did you notice that like the young woman that was with you at this point? I realized like when she went across the log, she moved in a really nimble way.
Yeah.
Like she was very nimble, and Josef Fares said that was intentional. So, you know, you can make a note of that. Seeing a large crowd outside this town that she's taking you to was kind of creepy because they're all frozen solid in snow, just like the lumberjacks. You know, that kind of made me feel uneasy. And it's even worse when you have to push like this giant catapult down the hill, and it goes straight through this crowd, and they just kind of disintegrate.
That was sad.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
it's
the
like
frozen village was like, yeah, it was very creepy, right? Very, very creepy.
And then you find like this invisible Yeti in it who is patrolling the streets of this frozen village, and you have to hide from him. And again, really creepy.
Yeah, because he's posing behind these like frozen dead people here.
It's pretty horrible. And then he walks over and picks one up that no one's hiding behind and just crumples it.
Yeah,
But-
it was scary.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I thought I at first thought my game was glitching because I was like, here are these massive footprints and thunderous footsteps, and
Yeah.
there's nothing there, but it's terrifying and eating things. And I was like, what happened to my game? Okay, well they clearly like they coded footprints, so it's intended to be invisible. Because maybe you couldn't even get the whole thing on the camera if it was that large, but. Yeah, it was just a weird moment for me.
Yeah, it was really, it just kind of lets your imagination do the work for you, even though like they are clearly like sort of humanoid footprints going along, and it sounds like this thing's supposed to be an abominable snowman. So you could kind of guess what it's supposed to be, but maybe they just didn't have the budget to animate it. So they just said like, well, we'll make footprints here and make it creepy because it's invisible. And then, you know, if you do get caught by it, it just kind of lifts you up in its invisible hand and crushes you, and that's it. So that's all you can see, but just not seeing it is an even creepier thing, and it's kind of an imaginative thing for like this fantastical world.
I like that it was invisible. It was scarier.
Again, your imagination does the work. Yeah. Like you get through the village past this thing, it starts to become nightfall, and the young woman has led you to this cave that is below a tree, and the young brother argues with the older one about whether or not they should follow her. This is like the first sign that things aren't all they seem, and maybe this isn't a good idea, even though it's kind of like, you know, there's some division between them, and it's kind of intentional for you to feel that way. You know, that has this younger woman kind of intended to create this division, or like, does she realize what's going on between the two brothers yet?
So I feel like she was definitely coming on strong to the older brother.
Yeah.
Throughout this time, so I wasn't surprised by the dynamic, and I almost wondered if the younger brother was like jealous or like feeling like a third wheel, kind of.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Like it felt intentional.
Yeah.
I was feeling creeped out by the young woman at this point, because at this point, as she's making her way through the village, she's not only is she nimbly jumping over logs, but she's like leaping gaps in bridges and doing all sorts of things that are not what people do. You know? I was like, oh, really weird.
Yeah.
Sus.
And then like, I was thinking to myself the first time I played it, I was like, well, they have a friend now. Come on. Like, you're not appreciative of like her. Like, you rescued her. Of course she's fine. You follow her into the cave that she takes you through, and the perspective that they take you through is really cool because you only see the shadows of them, and you crawl down through this burrow, and you have both brothers crawl through it, and then she's the third one in line and crawling behind you, and the screen gets dark, and you just hear the sound of something happening, and it sounds kind of monstrous, and the next thing you see, she's transformed into this sort of centaur spider in a sense, where like she's got an upper torso still, but her lower body is now a giant spider that is about to attack the boys. And at this point, Carrie, still on the couch next to me, just goes, "What the fuck?"
I did too. My notes are Jesus Christ.
Yeah. This whole section for me was like, what? Because the way, I mean, we'll get into it, but the way you defeat it too is just grotesque.
Ooh,
Yeah.
it's like Resident Evil.
Bilado Naiee?
She ends up containing the two boys inside of this webbed ball, and then you have to like get the boys to swing the ball up against the wall, and that like makes it fall off the string that it's attached to the ceiling, and then the older brother breaks out of it, and the younger brother stays in, and you have to use the younger brother inside this ball to run into her and get her to topple over on her back, and then have the older brother pull one of the legs off, and it's brutal.
It is brutal.
Nasty.
Again, Carrie, she just looks at me and just goes, "This is really fucked up." Like, yeah, I know. And it, like every time you pull one of them off, I start to feel a little bit sorry for the spider. But then she starts to attack again, and you're reminded, like, oh no, she wants to kill you and eat you. This is fine.
Yeah.
She lured you here. She knew.
Right.
So then you end up pulling like one of her last legs off, and I guess like the older brother was just a little bit too close to her and cocky. She ends up stabbing him with one of her talons that is venomous. And, he collapses. She's dead. But the older brother is then carried out of this lair by the younger brother. And, they both make their way to, I guess, the Tree of Life, which was right there. She did lead them to it. But they're right there, and the older brother is terribly injured, and so they sit down in front of the tree that they've been trying to get to this whole time, and the older one just tells the younger brother, go get what we need to save Dad, and he can also save the older brother as well. You have him climb the tree alone and like get up to this one specific spot that has this pool of magic water, and he fills up his like canteen or bag, whatever it was, with it, and then slides back down to where Naia is, and he gets down there and it's too late.
handle. Naia. Taliaba. Naia. 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 Naia.
I was so mad.
Yeah.
So mad.
It was
This part, the urgency that you felt at the beginning was back again, but for a different reason, right? Because now you're like, oh, because in your mind you're like, well, if it's going to help the dad, maybe it helps the brother too.
Right.
And so you're almost rushing through this, and the tree of life, the way that they displayed this or presented it was just like the way that the light played off of the darkness around it, and it was just stunning. And you're frantically running through it because you're like, oh, we gotta save Naia,
Yeah. And at this point, I think you might realize like this is not exactly the tree of life. It is just the tree of healing, because Naia's injury was just so great that he couldn't survive it. And as Naiee gets down there and realizes he couldn't save his brother, he tries to force this water down him, but he has already died. And this is where it gets really emotional. And this is not the point that it made me tear up. That comes later, but it does get really hard to watch, because this whole time you've had these two together, and they've gone on this journey to try and save dad and end up losing one of them. And you kind of have to wonder, was this sacrifice really worth it? Because now they do have the water. They have it to save dad, but they lost the brother in the process. And it was a really hard thing to just watch.
I'm just mad. I was like, are you joking me? This little brother already has to watch his mom die. Now this. And, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I blame her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That again, that the urgency that pushed you up the tree as fast as possible and then back down, it really hammers home how devastating it is when Naiee is like trying to force the water down Naia's throat in the hopes of reviving him, and there's just nothing there.
Yeah. It gets even harder to watch, because in the next scene you have control over Naiee, the younger brother, and you have to control him while he drags the older brother's body to the grave and buries him. That was
brutal, because it's slow.
Yeah, it's slow, and if you're not close to his body and you push the action button, the only thing that Naiee does is he just crumples down into a ball and cries. And I feel for him so hard here, but it is a difficult action to just make myself play and bury the character that I was playing as.
And
go ahead.
Slow. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, to like Steve's point, I think of like how slowly you're dragging the body. I think lends or adds to, I don't know, just like this experience. Like you feel the grief. I don't think like, if I could with the controls, I'd go fast and just get it over with. But because you have to just endure it, I think it really hit home
Yeah.
a little harder than
And something that Sarah talked about at the beginning of the episode is felt really profoundly here, and I think throughout the rest of the playthrough, which is that you're not using your left hand anymore.
When you've been playing video games for like 30 years, like I have, it feels intuitive to control your character with your left hand and do other stuff with your right hand, whatever that is in the game. And this game's unique because you control two characters. You control the older brother with your left hand and the younger one with your right hand. When you only have control of the younger one, I think that just that action of having only Naiee to control conveys that this is what it feels like to lose someone very close to you. This is how that feels, where just existing in the world feels wrong. And you can't escape the fact that you are not whole anymore, that you have lost something that is a part of you. And you can't stop thinking about it. It's that traumatic and it's that hard to ignore because it is every fiber of your existence that you are now not able to move through the world in the same way.
I think that's such a good point. And I feel like I kind of unconsciously thought that, but I never really like actually put it together. But I think it's so true that like it almost felt like a phantom limb where I kept trying or wanting to use my left hand to do things because that's how you move around the world in most PlayStation games is the left trigger, and not being able to do that or having it do nothing was such a weird experience. It felt like, like I was missing something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah, that's exactly how I felt too. Like a phantom limb, right? I like my left hand was there, like it was on the controller, but it wasn't doing anything. And so it wasn't actually really present in the game, but I still felt it there and I had it there. But Kevin, I agree with Sarah. That's a great point. Like it is a powerful message that's conveyed even through the mechanical, like play, of finishing the game, because you still have to finish. You just a part of you is gone now.
Yeah. There's nothing you can really do about it too, because no matter what you do with your left hand, nothing's going to happen. And you have to use the younger brother to do everything now. So that's the hardest part. But you have to bury him, and that was really hard to do, just emotionally. And then the owl griffin shows up. It's not dead. It flies in to take the younger brother back to the village. I thought to myself, well, you couldn't have brought us here, but I guess it was just so exhausted from the flight that it collapsed and we thought it was dead. But, it shows up like the eagles at the end of Lord of the Rings that could have flown them into Mordor, and flies him out back to the village.
I kind of thought that this griffin owl thing did die, but the brother somehow, he has these weird visions of ghosts and things, so when it first appeared I thought he was just imagining it, because it seems so, I don't know, just very convenient. Like it somehow knew where they were at that exact moment. But I guess
they did take the feather, right?
Yeah.
My thought was like, oh, maybe this is one that was related to that one, and it followed them in some way. I didn't think it was the same one necessarily, but I just thought maybe it was like they had some connection to the old one that had passed, that maybe that's what drew over this new one.
Yeah, it's possible that it saw that, like, oh, you saved my sibling, here, I'll come rescue you.
Right. It was very convenient, though.
Yeah. And then
a little hug.
Yeah. but it takes him back to the village, and now it's at night, and there's a storm happening. He drops the younger brother off at like the base of this rock that the house is on, and the younger brother has to find his way up to the house and then find dad and deliver the water. But you do some climbing around the rock and stuff, and then you get down to the beach where he normally would walk through to the other side of their village, and it's flooded from the storm. And he will wade into the water waist deep, but then stop. And you won't be able to do anything. If you hit the action button for Naiee, he will just like stare down at the water and say something and then not do anything. But I stood there for a few minutes and not like trying to figure out what to do. And it wasn't until I figured out like, oh, he never wanted to swim and always relied on his brother. And he gets down to the beach, and if you hit the action button for Naia, the older brother, Naiee gets in the water and swims through the flooded area. Explaining this the first time to my wife is what broke me. He swims on the memory of his brother, or it's his brother's spirit that's carrying him, or maybe he just forces himself to swim just like his brother. But no matter what, you feel that he is growing up and using his brother as inspiration to help him get through life. And the memory of Naia is still with him. It is probably the most emotional moment in the game for a lot of people.
Yeah. Definitely resonate with what you're saying, Kevin.
Yeah.
I surprisingly didn't tear up, but I think that might just be because I didn't have to explain it. Also, like, if I tried to explain it, like, to my partner who, like, didn't see the game at all, he'd probably be like, what are you talking about? Okay. Like, I had to press the left trigger. You don't understand. It's emotional. But yeah, no, it took me a couple of minutes too, where I was just standing there like, okay, am I supposed to go a different way? And then, like, I think just when I get frustrated in a game, I just start pressing buttons, and I happened to press the left trigger, and he started swimming. I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, this game is just taking me on a ride. Wow, okay. And I also wondered, too, like, I know you were saying that, like, maybe it's, like, inspiration of his brother or what, but it's interesting that you can interpret this in so many different ways, but I kind of felt like there was this theme of the younger brother always, like, being connected with the spirit of his mom, and then, like, I thought it was the spirit of the bird, and I don't know, I somehow thought it was more spiritual, and like you mentioned, he heard the faint voice of his brother, and I don't know if you guys realized this after he swam, but if you press the left trigger going forward, you hear the brother kind of directing him in the direction to go to get to the house, which is what the brother did throughout the game. So that was interesting as well. But yeah, I never would have expected that a left trigger or like a control would make me so emotional. That was very unique.
Yeah, that was not like the floor dropped out or anything, but the floor dropped out in my chest. Yeah. It was similarly to how you played it, Kevin. I went out there and I was like, okay, we got it. I see this full circle thing. I get it. He's got to swim. All right, I'm going to go out and I'm going to hit that action trigger for, Naiee. And he's doing nothing. And I'm just standing there in the water like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
And then when I hit the left trigger and he started moving, that was when, my chest cavity opened up and my heart dropped down. I was like, that's really good.
Yeah.
And I interpreted it as, when you lose somebody, this is where I really valued just how slowly and painfully and separate from every other game action, you had to drag your brother's body and then bury it at that tree, because it really emphasized the phantom limb thing, the separation. This is gone now, right? But that's never the case with grief, and it's certainly not the case with closure. Or well, it's the case with grief, yes, but when you achieve closure after a loss, it's when you realize that everything about the person that you loved and who was with you is still within you too. Maybe it's spiritual, but I also think, like, as scared as, if we want to get super meta about it, as scared as Naiee is of the water, these brothers are clearly close. I'm sure Naia tried to teach him how to swim, right? And at the very least, his brother showed the value of bravery and leaping into something because it's the thing that you have to do. The kinds of lessons that an older sibling is hopefully conveying to a younger sibling in between kicking their ass all the time. I think it as, you press the trigger because it was there, right? And it was the thing you needed to do. And that's the piece of the older brother that stays with the younger brother for the rest of his life, which is just a fucking beautiful thing.
And Naia he's never really gone, because you can still press the left trigger and something now happens even though he's not there.
Right.
It's very beautiful. It is it's wonderful. I did have one other write-in that I wanted to read. Jacob Hayes Verdon wrote to me and said, "I've never played a game where the controls played into the narrative like this game did. It's truly an experience that can only exist in video games, and it's great. I've never had a single pressing of the L2 button to take my breath away like Brothers did." And I absolutely agree with that. I've never started to tear up from just pressing a button in a game. Usually it's a case of like someone, like another character doing something else that gets me emotional. It's not my own action that really gets to me. And there's this part, and having to bury Naia that really does get to me, and you're doing it yourself, which is really hard. Naiee does get back to Dad and gives him the water and saves him. The whole game ends with a scene of them during the day. Like the next few days, they have created another grave for Naia next to Mom's grave, and they grieve over both of them at the same time. And the camera just kind of pans away with them. Carrie was watching this and asked me, well, what happens now? And I said, the younger brother and Dad have to find a way to have a relationship together. And that's the end of the story. I didn't feel like they were, at odds or disconnected at all. It's just that I felt like the two of them weren't close. And now each of them is all the other one has.
I felt bad, for the youngest brother, because even when they were grieving, it was really the dad that was sobbing on the ground, and the younger brother was like comforting him.
Yeah.
And I was not looking forward to the rest of the little boy's life.
Yeah. And Josef Fares said in his commentary, like, really, this is a story about the younger brother. Like, this is his story in the end, because it is a story about him growing up and becoming a little more mature, and more on the level of what the older brother was. So that was intentional, but still, I really do feel terrible for both of them, because they've lost not just Mom, but also Naia. And, it's horrible to think about that.
Yeah. Looking at my notes, the 3 items I had are mixed feelings. Little brother has learned that he can do hard things, and depressing.
Maybe.
Yeah. Because I saw that scene, how Sarah did too. The dad is just absolutely grieving, and the little brother Naii is there, almost comforting.
Yeah.
Which I guess makes sense because he's had more time. I don't know how much time, right, has actually, but to sit with the death. I mean, he put his brother in the ground and then covered him, and then so he's had that moment, whereas the dad is probably feeling all sorts of things, including guilt. Now he's got survivor's guilt. His son is gone and he's alive because of his son going to get the stuff to keep him alive. But yeah, I think that the more I think about it, it's sad. It's not depressing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It is, as you said, they still have each other, and it kind of seems like over time they're going to learn that. And the fact that we can sit here and speculate about these characters, about how they could possibly move through this loss, is a testament to how really wonderfully done this game is, and the story is.
Yeah.
Because that the dad is probably really broken up, of course, but now I have a sense that Naii has what he needs to help his dad come back into life and be his father to him, because when you're going through that kind of a profound loss, you need help. And he is strong enough to be that help for even his own parent.
Yeah.
Whereas before, I mean, he was so devastated by the loss of his mother, he couldn't get into the water. It's just incredible growth, and it's hard-earned growth. And yeah, it's sad, but I also think that there's hope.
It's, again, like you were saying, the story is so well crafted, but it continues to just shock me and impress me that this narrative came together without any dialogue whatsoever.
Yeah.
So cool.
It's done all through action, and it's beautifully done just to create this more universal experience that anyone can see or feel without any sort of language barrier there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that was really beautiful.
Do you have any final thoughts about Brothers before we wrap up?
Go hug your brothers.
Yeah, please do. Please just get in touch with the people that you love and let them know that you do.
And I think gratitude always helps to make people happy. So think about what those people mean to you, and then say, "Hey, thanks for being so awesome."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. By the way, Steve, you are really awesome. I love being your friend. Same with you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you.
I feel like it's mutual all around. I've never met Sarah in person, but Sarah, you're awesome too.
Yeah.
You are too, Steve.
Sarah, do you have any last things you want to say about Brothers at all?
I mean, I think this game, again, as we've been talking about throughout this episode, such a unique game, and wouldn't recommend it to everyone, but I think especially people who play a lot of games on consoles, who can understand, again, with this left trigger, being used to using that to navigate around the world in your character. I think all of those pieces are really extra special for someone who is used to normal, quote, normal games.
Yeah.
And also, this is not a children's game, which at first I thought it was.
You mean cutting off a giant's leg isn't something the kids do?
I mean, I don't know. My dad was accidentally buying me RPG game, or first person shooter games when I was 7. So I don't know. Maybe it is a kid's game.
Yeah. There are some seriously mature themes in this game, and it's not just about violence. It's about grief and getting past trauma and really dealing with what is holding someone back, from growing. So yeah, again, it's quite beautiful, and I really appreciate you, Steve, for picking this game. I think when I sent you that list of games, I said, like, well, do you want to talk about grief? Do you want to talk about following social norms, or do you want to talk about just shooting things and killing things? And I'm really glad you talked about this one.
Well, I'm such a ray of sunshine, I love that. I love that list. I was like, oh, let's get deep, baby. Let's get sad. Come on.
Perfect.
There's a lot to mine in this particular topic, and I just love the way that this game addressed it. It's really wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Steve and Sarah, for joining me to talk about our feelings and dig through this. It's been a wonderful episode to record with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah. And thank you, Sarah.
I am here too.
Thank you. Yeah. So, and to you all, thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this show, please share it with your friends. Share it on like any sort of social networks you have. Definitely looking for more people to listen, more games to play. And if you have suggestions for games to play, write in at psplusgameclub@gmail.com. Please go talk to the people that you love and tell them that you love them. There are some great themes to this game, and it's really important to just reach out to people. But until next month, when we talk about Blasphemous, please remember to have a good day and have fun playing around.